Okay, next topic is level and gain. This is super important. This is going to be a huge part of what you do every single weekend. So yeah, just this is good stuff to know. The first thing I'm going to do is just run through a couple of these terms. So amplitude is the same as volume. That I'm sure you know that already, but that's just something that I want to make sure everybody's on the same page about. If I say amplitude, I'm just talking about volume. And this is more going to be like individual channels, like one track of your mix, your guitar, your vocal, whatever. Um, so that's all that is. Level is the amount of sound in the room, is the best way that I can explain it. And that's measured in decibels. So you all have a dB meter at your campuses that you can turn on, and it'll tell you the level. We'll talk about that more in a second. Gain. So for right now, the only thing I'm going to say is that the gain knob, or wherever you can adjust the gain at, it might be digital, is not the same as volume. So adjusting the gain is not the same as adjusting the volume, but we'll talk about that more in a second. Okay, so first thing, amplitude, like I said, is just volume. So turning the fader up and down changes the amplitude. You already know that, but just making sure we're all good. How loud or quiet something is. Level. So this is what you're hearing in the room. So when you turn on the dB meter and it gives you a number in decibels, that's how loud or how quiet it is in the space that you're in. This is important because you don't want to hurt anyone, but you also want everyone to be able to hear what's happening. So setting levels is more common in like a studio setting, and we'll talk about that with gain and stuff too. But getting the level of a room, it's important to stay consistent, but at the same time, there's no magic number. There's no like one number that you should stay at 100% of the time. It's going to fluctuate because it's sound. It's moving all around. It's going to be different. So one thing I would say about this before we talk about kind of the measurements of it is just maybe a good practice would be if you can during like a production run through, if you or if someone can just walk around through the room and if you can measure the level from different points in the room, because there is actual like physics involved with the closer you get to a sound source, the louder it's going to be, which is pretty, like you could have guessed that, but like there is actual measurements. Basically, if you double your distance, or if you have your distance, I guess, between you and a sound source, you're going to get a 6 decibel increase. So depending on where you are in the room, you might be pretty far from where the sound is actually coming from, which means that what you measure in the back of the room is going to be significantly quieter than what someone in the front of the room is hearing. So maybe a good practice would be to kind of walk around during run-throughs, try to get a measurement of the level in different spots, which makes this just more tricky because you like you said, you don't want to blow anybody's ears off their head. That would be ridiculous. Anyways, so anything between 90 and 100 is usually good. 80 is pretty quiet, relatively. If it was anywhere under 90, like you'd probably be able to hear people talking in the room at certain points more than you would be able to hear what's actually happening on stage, which is obviously not what you want. So anything between 90 and 100 is really good. And like I said, this might be a little bit quieter back where you're at, depending on how far away you are from the sound source. If you're close to this, if you're pretty close to the stage, then I would say just go with your measurement from where you're at. But either way, like it doesn't hurt to kind of walk around and get different measurements. But anything between 90 and 100 is good. This is safe. 100 is pushing it a little bit, but it's still safe. Like I would try to stay under 100 personally, but like I said, there's no magic number. The only magic, or I guess not magic number, is never ever go above 110. Actually, never hit 110. Don't ever go above like 103, because 110 is something called the threshold of pain, which basically means that you can be exposed to that for like less than 10 minutes before you start suffering like permanent damage to your ears, which is scary, and you don't want to cause that for anybody, even though um, they may or may not even realize that's happening, which is the more dangerous part. That's kind of like, as an engineer, a lot of this, as far as health with people's ears, falls on you because they may not even realize something is happening to them. And again, that's not to be like terrifying, but that's just kind of how it is. Never ever hit 110. Don't go above like 103. Like there's no need you would need to be, no reason you would need to be louder than that. 90 to 100 is a safe range. But like I said, no magic number. Get some different measurements from different spots in the room. You'll figure it out. It's all good. Just don't go above that number. cool. So gain. A lot of times, if something is not loud enough, then maybe you've like already got a fader pushed up all the way, um, and you're just like, well, I'm gonna turn the gain up because I'm just not. I don't like how much I'm hearing of this. Whatever. Okay, this is really like you can't you can't push the gain as a way of increasing the volume, which I know like doesn't really make sense because it does increase the volume, but that's not the purpose of it. So gain is like pushing the signal. It's not the same as just turning the volume up. So when you're pushing the gain, you're actually like amplifying the signal. So what this is like it's more easily going to lead to distortion, and you're going to start hearing some things. You're going to start hearing some like fuzz, some noise, some cracks and pops and stuff that you don't want to hear in your audio, because gain is meant to get something to an audible level. Like a lot of times with microphones, you have to adjust the gain because they don't pick up enough on their own. But it's meant to get something to like an audible and adjustable level. It's not meant to push the volume more than it is on the fader, if that makes sense. And again, like I understand like this is a little bit hazy. So again, if you need to leave a comment, if you need to ask a question, I can try to explain this a little bit more. But essentially, all you need to know is like try to only adjust the gain like towards the beginning. Get something to the level, to an audible level that it needs to be. Do everything else on the fader because turning up the gain is just eventually it's going to make stuff. It's going to make it clip, which we'll talk about in a different video. But it's going to sound really bad if you mess with the gain too much. So just try not to do that. Try to get it to a good level at first, whenever you are starting, your run through or whatever. Then after that, you shouldn't really have to mess with the gain too much. So a couple more things just before we're done with this video. This has been a long one. Thank you for sticking with me. Louder isn't always better, and that's a thing that is kind of hard to explain to people. And I still like I love for stuff to be loud. Like I make mixes probably louder than they should be a lot. So it's hard, but louder is not always better. It doesn't necessarily mean it sounds as good. We feel like we're hearing more of high and low frequencies as the volume increases. So we're like, oh, this sounds more clear. This sounds like more, present. Well, I hear this bass more. But that's not actually always true. And we're going to talk about that more in psychoacoustics, which I know it sounds scary, but we'll get there. Yeah, so just adjusting volumes can be really dangerous, is all I'm trying to say. So just tread carefully with this. Obviously, you want to be able to hear it. Like I said, you want to be in that 90 to 100 range as often as you can be. But just adjusting it too much, changing it too much, can be a little bit dangerous. So hopefully this gave you some like principles you can apply, some things you can hold on to next time you're doing a mix. Yeah, so I hope this was helpful. All important stuff to keep in mind. Mainly just remember a lot of that stuff that we were talking about, gain. And yeah, you should be good to go if you can pick up on all these things, which you totally can. So